Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have review of the HUAWEI Pura 70 Ultra. Let's get started. This is Huawei's flagship device, so we are going to find the most advanced technology from Huawei in this phone. However, because Huawei is facing several challenges, the price is managing it at a very competitive level. In Mexico, it has been presented at a price of 30,999 pesos. That is $1,860 approximately. Although remember that in Mexico taxes are already included in the price, but they are applying different promotions and discounts. So in many occasions you can find it at a price of 24,799 pesos. That is approximately $1,490. Although remember that the prices here are not the same as over there, but it definitely puts it to compete in a high-end segment. But within the high-end, it is one of the cheapest devices, and consider that it comes with 512 gigabytes of storage and 16 gigabytes of RAM. So in that sense, it is indeed above many of its competitors who generally offer you the higher storage versions at a higher price. So in this case, it's just a single version, but with a lot of storage and a lot of RAM. Also remember that in the Huawei store, they usually always offer you additional gifts. So consider all this when deciding your purchase, and remember that by coming with MUI 14 you can install in a much simpler way. Google services and applications will work natively, not virtualized, because it is no longer through Gbox. I have a specific video where I talk about that. So let's go now to the review to see what it can offer us against its main competitors, which I insist will be the high-end devices. The design of the device will be completely premium, offering us a 4-curved screen. So both at the top and at the bottom and on the sides we will have this feeling of a slight curve that is very subtle, but that is very pleasant to the touch when scrolling and sliding, although the protective glass that comes attached from the factory could give you another feeling, so it's up to you as a user if you want to leave the screen on or peel it off. But in case you decide to peel it off, you should not be too afraid, because this device has the new version of Kunlun glass called Crystal Armor Kunlun glass. It's super tough and super hard, so you really don't have to be too afraid of drops. Although obviously all glass will tend to break, but this one has a very high level of toughness, so it's not only a beautiful device but also a tough one. On the right side we will find the power button along with the volume buttons in an aluminum frame that also gives us not only a premium feel but also a good level of resistance. On the top side is placed a microphone and the infrared, which looks like another microphone, but it is actually infrared, which is going to work for us to make this device a universal remote control. The left side is completely clean in this aluminum frame, and in this profile view we can see that the thickness is 8.4 millimeters. So even being a flagship device is not characterized by being very thick. And at the bottom we will find the main speaker, then the USB-C port accompanied by another microphone, and finally the tray. In this tray we can place 2 nano SIM cards, although this may vary depending on the different countries and even stores. Possibly if you buy it with a phone company, the second tray will come locked. And in this case I have in my hands the Mediterranean Green Edition, but it is also available in Onyx Black color. The only thing is that this Green Edition comes with a synthetic leather back cover that really gives a very nice feeling in the hand. Plus the color is very nice, and if you look closely you will notice that it has quite a nice pattern. So in design Huawei never disappoints, and what I like is that generation after generation it is adapting the design to look modern and not look exactly like the last generation, and despite that it keeps the same identity. Remember that it also has the IP level of resistance against water and dust, so I insist that it is not only a beautiful device but also a resistant one. If it falls into the water, it has a very high chance of surviving, although remember that these tests are done in pure water, so if you submerge it in pool or seawater, it is recommended that you do so at a very shallow depth and rinse it very well with pure water after these activities. Also do it for a short time. The camera module protrudes quite significantly, but something that I love in this version is that they include a case, but it is not just any case, but it is a case that includes a nice design, also has this touch of synthetic leather. So even though you put a case, will still look very nice design, and in this case the camera is a little better protected because it is not as exposed as when you use the device without a case. The screen will be of excellent quality. Its size is 6.8 inches and offers us a specific resolution of 2844 by 1260 pixels. Then it is slightly higher than Full HD, and it definitely shows we have a very good level of detail, plus very intense colors and also very high contrast, giving us as a result a very good viewing experience. Also has very good viewing angles. As you can get to notice, even viewing the content from the side, you will have an excellent readability, very good colors, and you should know that it is a screen compatible with HDR content. This means that some specific areas of the screen will have a very good readability, very good colors, and you should know that it is a screen compatible with HDR content. This means that some specific areas of the screen will have a very good readability. This means that some specific areas of the screen will be able to emit more brightness to give a sense of more realism, i.e. can handle the brightness in specific areas and not only a global brightness. This results in a very pleasant viewing experience, although as a curious fact, if you want to take advantage of the maximum quality of the screen, not all applications are compatible with it. For example, in Netflix tells us that does not work with HDR and can only play in SD, so it is a very basic quality playback that supports Netflix, although it is compatible with the contents of Netflix, but not going to play in a very high quality. In the case of the Disney application, if you get to take advantage of a good level of detail, then this has no problem. Prime Video does not seem to have any problem with the level of detail or the use of the technologies of this screen. The same will happen with Max, where yes, we will find a very good quality in the reproduction, so the only drawback is with Netflix that does not show content in high definition. Then when viewing content in HDR can reach a peak of up to 2500 nits, which is not the highest in the industry, that must be recognized, but it is more than enough to have a very good feeling of visualization. So it's definitely a screen that gives a very good quality. The higher brightness is also very good for good outdoor viewing, and the lower brightness will also be low enough for comfortable use in the evenings. Note that even though it doesn't have some additional dimming adjustment in the accessibility options, actually the lower brightness is very comfortable for using this device at night. And speaking of comfort, its dimming is 1440 Hz, so also the flickering of the screen is not going to fatigue your eyes so much when you are viewing the content at night. And remember that it is a screen that offers us a dynamic refresh rate capable of varying between 1 and 120 Hz. So remember that it is a screen that offers us a dynamic refresh rate capable of varying between 1 and 120 Hz. So it is a screen that offers us a dynamic refresh rate capable of varying between 1 and 120 Hz. So when you are viewing static content, the screen will go up to 120 Hz to show you super smooth movements. So it is a high-end screen wherever you see it, that also has the traditional dark mode or visual rest modes, also flicker reduction, as I was saying, for a little less tired eyesight, and has two modes. I would have liked it to also bring the option of natural tone that analyzes the white color of the environment to adapt the white color of the screen, but that option is not available in this device. The sound experience will be positive. The main speaker is at the bottom and has an excellent quality with a very good presence of bass frequencies, and the secondary speaker is placed in the area of the headset for calls, also offering a good presence of bass frequencies, although not as high as the main speaker, but if they come to be perceived, so it gives us an excellent audio quality in general. Let's listen to a small test, but remember that it is not the same as listening live. The volume is also very good, and in this case comes complemented with some software features, although the name is quite strange. For example, has Sound Booster, that what it will do is send the audio from the microphones of this device to a Bluetooth device, can be headset or speaker. Then you can use this phone as a microphone for other people to hear you, although the speaker can generate a little annoying feedback. Then it is a feature that I think is not so used but is available, and in this case has the sound effects, Huawei Heist sound effects, where you can customize your audio experience but exclusively when you are using headphones, either wired or Bluetooth, so it has some surround sound presets. In fact, you can also select the style of sound you want to transmit, or also in the standard setting you can access a 10-band equalizer that also has a slider to amplify the bass. so it is a very good equalizer. But what bothers me is that it is not available for the entire system, but exclusively when you have headphones connected. As I told you, it does not have a headphone jack, but in case you decide to use wireless headphones, the good news is that if it supports good quality codecs such as LDAC, AAC, LC3, LL, and L. 2HC, which would be the codec of Huawei, then if you could connect wireless headphones to have high quality sound or high resolution. With respect to microphones, in addition to the microphone that is at the bottom and the microphone that is at the top, integrates another microphone that is quite hidden at the bottom of the main camera. The truth is that it is very subtle, but it can also help you capture audio with better quality, and then you will hear an audio test recorded with this device.
Este audio ha sido grabado con los micrófonos integrados del HUAWEI Pura 70 Ultra.
Fortunately, they give us excellent audio quality. Below you will see a video recorded with this device setting the sound system in my living room at maximum volume to see how it behaves in these noisy environments.
I'd run 1,000 miles if I could run with you.
As you could notice, the device captures with a very good definition the sounds even at high volumes, so it would be an excellent tool to record concerts. The front camera of this device is 18mm, so it is a fairly wide camera, and we will see in a moment the results offers 13 megapixels in its sensor, f aperture 2.4 and autofocus aperture. Possibly will play against him when there is not so much light. Something I would like to suggest that Huawei did is to support a gesture of fast opening the camera, so we do not need to press the icon both when we have the device locked and when we have the device on. In this case, the only tool or shortcut for the camera is to double press the volume down button when you are with the screen off, but obviously, that gesture is not going to work if you are in any other application and want to open the camera, so I think it could improve the user experience creating a shortcut for the camera when the device is on. Obviously, the picture-taking experience will be very snappy and very good. But another thing I don't like about Huawei is that it immediately accesses portrait mode. So if you are on the rear camera with picture mode and you rotate to the front camera, it immediately switches to portrait mode, and if you have blur enabled, you are going to notice that your photos are going to come out very weird sometimes because we don't always want the blur effect. So I'm not very convinced by this tool. And remember that for the portrait effects to be applied, you must use the 1x setting if you are in the wide angle setting. You are not going to have the blur effect to have a natural perspective. Here on the front camera, you don't have a burst available by holding down the shutter, and you also don't have the capture through the palm gesture, which for me is quite annoying because it can sometimes be a bit complicated to reach the shutter. Instead, it integrates a smile detection, which I think is a bit less useful or less usual, and also captures by sound by saying a keyword or speaking loudly. So there are two ways to capture, but in my point of view, they are inferior in functionality and practicality if it compares it to the other two, which I think is a little less useful or less usual, and also captures by sound by saying a keyword or speaking loudly. So they are two ways to capture, but from my point of view, they are inferior in functionality and practicality. If you compare it with the palm gesture, we are also going to have the option of the shutter. We will also have the option of the floating shutter, that is to say we can move the shutter to where we want, and this could compensate a little better to capture more easily this type of photographs. This front camera I really liked a lot, especially in color management. That makes also has a very good level of detail and is also a camera that offers a very good level of amplitude. Then the amplitude is one of its strongest points because you will have a lot of ease to take group pictures, although by this same amplitude in the edges could be generated a slight distortion, but it is really nothing serious if you compare it with the quality of the final photograph. And since it has autofocus, if you are close to the camera, will also leave a good level of detail, having a very good result. Observe how you could get to perceive many details of your face. Then it is an excellent camera for this type of use. Indoors is where I feel it has a little less quality than I would like. Although this is natural because of the amplitude, that has a disadvantage of the wide lenses is that normally do not have much light input, and in this case it shows as the photograph is seen with less contrast but still maintains a good level of contrast. Less contrast, although it still maintains a good level of detail, but I definitely think that it is not a photograph of as much quality as we saw it outdoors in backlighting. Note that the preview is not optimized, so it burns and overexposes the illuminated areas, but after taking the photograph, note how well it processes the colors. The shadow area still looks quite good with good level of detail, and the highlights area, which was really very intense, is very well balanced with very good color accuracy. So in this case, in daytime, also in backlit conditions, it gives us excellent quality, and at night it will also have a good quality. Although in the colors it is slightly pale. Although in this picture you are seeing it use the screen as a flash simulation. In fact, you can perceive it through my lenses. From my point of view, the best thing would be to take the picture without that flash simulation to have a much more accurate color, although perhaps the level of detail is not as high. But observe how in the most complicated possible condition, that would be the night backlight, also gives a good performance. If you use the screen to illuminate your face, it can be improved. Screen to illuminate your face can improve the result, although the color is unbalanced because the screen has a very cold illumination, so if you are in a warm condition you can get a little strange result if you use the screen as a flash simulation. But anyway, the device with the night mode can get to give a good enough result, although the color is not very good in this kind of extreme conditions, although obviously they could improve it with an update. But look at the quality of portraits that it is able to give us at night. I think it is a good result. The noise is well controlled. The blur is also natural in the background, although at night it could become a little more complicated to have more precision in the focus due to the low lighting. And I insist this device to have such a wide camera can suffer a little in these conditions where there is not as much light as outdoors. And here is a portrait photo outdoors where you see that the device has a little strange behavior. Because although it has a good detection on the body and the face, you can see that the objects are not completely out of focus, but it does not keep them completely in focus, so the result can look a little strange. In fact, I did another test and see how in this case, if you got to keep focused a part of this object but then goes out of focus, then in this sense can still improve, because if I have seen other devices in the front camera are able to keep focused also to objects within the portrait mode. On the back, we will find a quite advanced photographic system, even though there are only 3 cameras. We start with the ultra-wide camera, which is 13mm. It offers us a 40-megapixel sensor and has f2.2 aperture with autofocus, so it will also work as a macro camera. Then it is already offering us an additional functionality in addition to a high-resolution sensor. Then we will find the main camera, which, remember that it integrates a retractable system. Note, when you leave the camera, this camera will hide a little bit, and when you are going to use it will protrude a little more. This in order that the lens projects light to the sensor with a good quality, as it is a huge sensor and would need the camera to be so outstanding at all times, but that would cause the device to be a little more uncomfortable. So this mechanism that Huawei has engineered helps the device to remain even a little thinner. This camera offers us a 27mm lens with a variable aperture from f1.6 to f4.0. That is another of the star sections of Huawei. Note that there is the aperture up to f4.0, and we are now going to open it little by little because the most it can open is f1.6. So we have a variable aperture of very good quality to achieve various types of photographs. Good quality to achieve various types of photographs that I will tell you in a moment, but this is a mechanism that really very few devices incorporate today. Obviously, the camera will also have optical stabilization, and its sensor is 50 megapixels. In fact, it's a sensor CMOS of 1 inch, giving a quality definitely another level. And taking advantage of the high-resolution sensor, it offers us a kind of virtual telephoto 2x54mm lens with 12.5 megapixels, and obviously it retains the same characteristics of this lens. And finally, we have the zoom camera. In this case, it offers us 95mm, that is 3.5x optical zoom. It has f-aperture 2.1, something that is completely impressive considering the zoom that it is able to achieve. So it has very good light input, and it has 50 megapixels on the sensor autofocus and optical stabilization. And not only is it spectacular because of that, but its autofocus is also able to focus at a close distance, so it also works as a telemacro camera. So as you realize, even though it has 3 cameras, it actually, if you consider that it has 3 cameras, it is actually a telemacro camera. It has 3 cameras actually. If we consider 2 cameras here, 2 cameras here, and another 2 cameras here, we would have 6 cameras in total. Next, we will try to capture number 3 first, looking at the viewfinder of the cell phone and then looking towards the device that we have on the back since it has a slight delay, and let's see how they perform. As you can see, the phone comes perfectly well optimized to capture the exact moment when you are looking through this cell phone. If you are looking at real life, the result is going to be a little bit early, so I think the performance is excellent, and there is also a burst available, which we are going to see how it works. It takes a little while to start, but it has a limit of 100 pictures with good speed, so you have the exact moment. And note that it took almost a second to start the burst, so I think the start is a little slow, but fortunately then allows you to extract the exact moment. Something curious is that in the settings includes an option to improve the images that by default is disabled. I must anticipate that for all my tests enable this option. The camera interface is also renewed. Note that at the bottom offers some other tools to configure the photograph, but the most notable is the artificial intelligence and also the Huawei X-Match technology that will give us some different parameters of color interpretation. These are not simply color filters that are applied on top of the captured photo, but are different ways to interpret the color for your photos. Then I like that Huawei gives you to choose the interpretation you prefer in a moment. I show you several results. In the main interface, you can touch on the screen to adjust the exposure or focus, and obviously in the professional mode, we will find many more parameters among them. Professional, we will find many more parameters, including the type of metering, also the mate that can go up to a figure of 409,600. So it is a really high mate that very few smartphones offer you today. Also allows you to modify the aperture on the main camera. But pay attention, because it is not a virtual aperture, but it is a physical aperture that I showed you a moment ago, unlike the vast majority of smartphones today that in case of letting you modify the aperture will only do so virtually. And we will also find the shutter speed with up to 30 seconds of exposure, compensation, the focus, the white balance, and note that also allows us to take pictures in RAW or JPGL for a much more advanced photographs, and we will also find a focus assist light enabled. Although personally I have not found much use for it. Possibly it would also need a histogram that we cannot enable, but we can enable a grid. Something I would also like Huawei to improve would be that it could scan QR codes from the main camera interface, because it is not able to do this type of activities. For that, you need to enter it and lens with the shortcut in the lower right corner, and through this application, if you can perform the scan, but it needs an additional step, unlike other devices from the main camera interface are able to do this action. Similarly, it does not have an automatic document scanner from the main camera interface, but you can go to the special mode called Documents, and from this it will automatically detect the edges of your sheets. But note that it is a simple scan that is just cut the image, and already while today I have already seen other devices that also optimize the color, try to remove wrinkles or shadows and allow you to add multiple sheets to a PDF document. I insist that it is a very simple scanner that only allows you to modify the edges of the detection, and already fortunately in the share menu if you could export it to PDF through printing, but you cannot add multiple pages. So I insist that it is a fairly simple scanner that hopefully still can improve with updates. This device allows us to take high resolution photos with the main camera, are some of the largest, and definitely if you reach to perceive a very good level of detail, by default uses artificial intelligence to try to further optimize the details, and definitely the result is completely positive. You can crop your photos and still appreciate an excellent level of detail in them without artificial intelligence if there is a difference, as it is not reached to perceive the detail as well and do not have as much sharpness. So it is highly recommended to use artificial intelligence in photographs of very fast movements. This device is a specialist, although only with the main camera. In this case, the ring in green was spinning, and with the ultra-wide camera is not achieved to see so well defined. As you can notice, there are some areas that are seen with a little more movement than we would like, although with the main camera, observe how it appears better defined, practically frozen, although it is also a very good example of the ring in green color. Better defined, practically frozen. Although it is also very curious that if you try to get closer to notice the smallest details, the pixels will be a little bit noticeable. Although it is a little strange, but it is only if you get very close to the image in reality. I think it is a very good camera for captures in fast movements. Although the zoom camera does not have the same behavior, I really like the color management of this device because I think it has a very good level of precision. It doesn't oversaturate the colors and maintains a very good contrast, and in this case it has an excellent level of detail. Because the photographs in automatic mode are of 25 degrees of detail. In automatic mode are 24 megapixels, which is twice the resolution of what usually give other devices, even the high-end in automatic mode, so the pictures really look very detailed, and this in conjunction with the excellent color and light management that has this device result in photographs exaggeratedly good. Huawei also offers other color calibrations. In case you want a little more intense color tone and more contrast, you can select that preset so that all your photos are interpreted with the color of this style. It also includes a bright mode that will brighten the shadows much more, again in case you want this color rendition, and all these pictures come out with 24 megapixels. It even has a monochrome mode, which is not as simple as just grayscaling the picture, but it renders the shadows in this same way. The result looks very attractive for those who like black and white photography. The ultra-wide camera has practically the same color rendition, and in this case we are also going to appreciate a very good quality in the lens. Curiously, also the photographs will be 24 megapixels. Then you have a good level of detail also using this ultra-wide camera, and again you have these color renditions that I was telling you about, so you can choose exactly the one that you like. And this device also allows us to zoom 2x, maintaining optical quality. Observe that despite being digital zoom, actually the photograph looks exaggeratedly well detailed with the zoom camera also. Maintains the same color rendition, and that is something that I like about this device, that maintains a good consistency in the color rendition between the three lenses, and in this case it is a very good quality lens. Is something I like about this device, that maintains a good consistency in color rendition between the three lenses, and in this case is a very high quality lens. We see again that there is no presence of distortions in the edges, has an excellent color rendition, and due to the nature of the lens can generate this type of blur effects on objects that are closer or further away from the main focus. So I really love the results that we can have with this camera. And note that with the 10x zoom it still maintains a good level of detail. In this case the pictures will be 14 megapixels and it still looks very good. Even note the background mesh, as it looks like it's a very good looking camera. The background mesh, as it looks very well detailed. Each element looks very sharp. Some will be more optimized with artificial intelligence, but still maintains good textures and details. Then it is a camera of excellent quality. This would be a photograph with 30x digital zoom, and I insist that still looks very good, although in this case they begin to lose, maybe some of the details are lost. I insist that it still looks very good, although in this case perhaps some textures begin to be lost, and the maximum it reaches is 100 equis, but definitely in this sense, if we will see a result a little more forced or artificial, observe, we will give a tour of all focal lengths. This would be a photograph of 13 millimeters, now 27 millimeters, then 50. Now we are looking at the telephoto camera, which is 95 millimeters, and definitely the result looks very detailed at each of these distances at 270 millimeters, which would be a 10x zoom. And you can also notice the good level of detail that it has, although in this case it is already beginning to be noticed that it is a digital when it is a digital camera. I would say that at 30x is the maximum zoom where it still has a quality that we could consider good, because even though it allows you to go up to 100 equis, it seems to me that in this case the result is no longer so attractive. Indoors I didn't like the color rendition so much, although I think it was quite realistic, but I'm a bit used to other devices that try to optimize the result a bit more, so the feeling is a bit strange. Comparing it to real life, I later realized that it did look quite similar, although the photography in general I hadn't liked it as much as it looked. And again, with the main camera and the zoom camera, it keeps pretty much the same color rendition. It's just that in the ultra-wide camera we have a little less contrast, but actually the pictures come out very well. And the advantage, as I told you, is that it allows you to select other color rendition settings depending on which one you prefer. Possibly other devices have a more similar interpretation to this setting, where the shadows are much more accentuated, and that's why the main result had seemed to me a little less attractive, but I insist that the color accuracy is quite good. Even the zoom camera notes the good level of detail it is able to give us. It is excellent even in this kind of low light conditions due to its f2.1 aperture. It has an excellent light input, and so even at 10x zoom we're going to have an excellent result in these kinds of conditions. In backlight, the preview looks considerably optimized, and that's something I love, and Huawei is to be congratulated for making this change, as most devices in these types of environments are going to have the highlights area completely overexposed or burned out, but Huawei has done an excellent job. This would be the result with the main camera, and believe me, it does a very good balance of highlights and shadows, maintains a very good level of detail, and by the nature of the lens and sensor generates a nice blur in the background for this type of photography, even though they are not considered portrait photography. With the ultra-wide camera, it also maintains a good balance of highlights and shadows, although it does not have as much detail as the main camera, but it still performs excellently. The one that failed in these tests was the zoom camera, which in this case, as you realize, does get to burn and overexpose some areas of the background. I hope this can be corrected with an update, because I'm sure they can do it, but speaking of the photo quality, it's still good. I hope they correct this little detail. And at night, these cameras behave very well if you do not use the night mode, which is quite curious, and I think it is another of the sections that should be corrected with an update. Notice that the ultra-wide camera has an excellent performance. The darkest areas are practically free of noise, and that is something very remarkable that few devices can achieve, still maintaining a good level of detail. In addition, the most illuminated area still has a good balance, but note that using the night mode, it is curious that the highlights area gets to overexpose much more, so the behavior seems strange to me. With the main camera, the difference is even more noticeable. Look at the excellent photography we have because of the level of detail, the good exposure, the noise management, even the darkest areas come out well defined. And with the night mode, it's really quite a strange picture, with some very yellowish edges. So it's not really recommended to use night mode at the moment, which is funny because usually at night you need to use night mode, but on this device it's better to use auto mode. With the zoom 2x setting, we also have an excellent night photography, although again the night mode gives a very yellow result. And finally, with the zoom camera, we see an excellent result, and with the night mode we lose a bit of contrast. But notice how even in the darkest areas these cameras are able to pick up a lot of illumination, and in this case with the night mode it does improve the level of detail a little bit more. Now notice how with the main camera we have a good result, but if you use the night mode it improves the colors a little bit more. So let's say the night mode is still a bit unstable, there are moments where the result will be very good and moments where not so much. But I'm impressed that this device is able to take such good pictures in such dark scenes. In this case, for example, with the 2x digital zoom, you still see excellent photography, and if you apply the night mode, you see even better optical quality. Even the zoom camera, which is the one that usually performs poorly at night, in this case is extraordinary, and with the night mode, it also raises the level of detail. So it is really surprising that at night you can take pictures with zoom 10x of this quality. Obviously in this case you already noticed little detail, but believe me, it was a very dark situation where very few devices will be able to give us a result this good. Even moonshots are going to come out great. In this case I love how it handles the lighting perfectly well. And notice how in this case we're not talking about just an overlay of the moon as we had seen in some past generations or on other devices, but there could even be an object stuck between your camera and the moon, and the device is going to interpret it pretty well, even though it's going to obscure most other things and the moon is going to be well exposed. To talk about macro photography, it is important that you know the variable aperture that this device has, since very few currently have this capability. Notice that in this case the photograph has an aperture of f1.6, which is the widest the diaphragm can be. Although this can generate a very good entry of light, it will also cause the focus to be very punctual. For example, in this case, the bottom area is in focus, but notice how the rest of the picture will be out of focus, which can give you an undesirable result. But notice how this device has the ability to close its aperture down to f4.0. So in this case, we have a much more uniform focus, and it can definitely help you in this type of macro photography. However, the device is not going to adjust its aperture very well in automatic mode. For example, in this case it is a macro photograph and only 0 to f2 0 point, so we don't have such a uniform focus. There are some areas of the photograph that are in focus, but other areas that will be a little blurred or out of focus. So I would like from the automatic mode, when it detects that you are going to take a macro photograph, it will close down to f4 0 point to have a more accurate focus. Then manually you will have have to close the aperture if you want to have more evenly focused pictures, but notice how in this case, even with 2x's of digital zoom, the result is exaggeratedly detailed. The photograph impressed me too much in this macro section. And it is even more impressive if you consider that the zoom lens has macro capabilities as well. So, this photograph would be 270 millimeters, although we are talking about digital zoom, but it is perfectly well optimized. And look at the tremendous detail that it's capable of. It really surprises the hell out of you because just so you have a reference, it's exactly this area that we photographed. So it's definitely a super versatile camera, capable of taking good pictures close up, far away, medium distance, and everywhere. Just remember that the variable aperture is only present on the main camera, but the device gives excellent pictures also using the rest of the lenses. So it's a very good camera, but if anything I might suggest that they improve the panorama mode, as the color in panorama mode is not as accurate as in normal mode, and also we're going to notice that it doesn't allow us to take pictures with the ultra-wide camera in this panorama mode, which would give us a lot more range. So it's a request for a small improvement that I could propose. And for portrait photography, notice that it's going to offer us very good quality, even taking portraits with the 27mm camera, which would be the 1x camera. We have excellent performance, especially notice how the hair gets to keep it very natural. So you don't see a cropped result as we might see on other devices. Even the objects, they keep them very well focused as well, giving an excellent result. And something that I like is that it also allows us to take portrait pictures at different focal lengths. For example, this would be a zoom of something like 1mm, that is 2x digital zoom. We continue to see good treatment on the hair and excellent edge detection. In addition, it should also be noted that it has excellent handling in backlighting, as no illuminated area gets to look burned out. It can also take portrait shots at 95mm, that is 3.5x zoom. And again, in this case, the result is very positive. Look again at the hair and how well detailed it is. Although it's not going to be 100% accurate, it could still come up with some small imperfections, but it really is a camera that has a very high standard for this type of portrait photography. So I wanted to put it to a more complex test to see what Huawei can still perfect. And in this case, it would be moving portraits. In this scene, I was jumping and moving my hands, and notice how one of my arms is completely out of focus, giving a rather strange result. Although in another attempt he was able to take a good picture in this scenario, but still other areas of the picture were out of focus. So it's not quite as accurate in motion portraits, but still manages to give us remarkable results. But I think this would be the next step to improve, since even with the aperture mode, specifically talking about virtual aperture, it would indeed be able to give us this kind of pictures, keeping objects in focus in a very nice way and generating a very remarkable bokeh effect in the background. Take a look at the pictures it would be able to take using this mode. It really is a very good quality. So it's a very high-end camera that I have no doubt will be one of the best in the industry today. For video recording, an excellent news is that this device supports 4K video using any of the cameras, both the front and all the back cameras. So that compatibility is really quite remarkable. While you're recording, notice that we have a nice interface as well. We have a new zoom ring, which is quite convenient, although the maximum zoom is going to vary depending on the resolution that you're recording at. But I like that it's a pretty convenient ring, and we also have quick shortcuts to switch between different lenses. So we have a lot of practicality in this regard. We're also going to be able to take pictures while we're recording, and we can also pause and resume our video recording. But something very curious is that it does not allow us to rotate to the front camera while we are recording, and I mentioned that because in older Huawei devices the option was enabled. Even when recording in full HD, the button to rotate the front camera is not enabled, so we are more limited in that aspect. Hopefully they will add it back with an update, because it was one of its strengths, but now it is no longer present. And finally, we have the button to turn on the flashlight without the need to stop our video recording. Note that for video recording, we also have available the X-Mesh color rendering that we can select, although there is no monochrome mode. And also within the professional mode, we can take advantage of all the manual parameters within the video recording. And all that available also while recording in 4K at 60 frames per second. In fact, while we are recording, we can change these parameters. So, the video recording is quite professional, although it does not allow us to record in a log mode or something more advanced, unlike other devices we have seen today. And something curious about Huawei is that it also has a multi-camera mode that will allow you to use other Huawei devices to record from various angles. Note that if you have multiple Huawei devices with your Huawei account, you can access their cameras directly from this phone. In this case, I have the Pure 70 Ultra, but I'm going to access the rear camera on the Pure 70 Pro that I have here. And once you authorize it, notice how you can perfectly control this camera. And notice you can start your video recording and then you can switch to another camera, whether you want to the rear camera on this device or the front camera on the Pura 70 Pro that I have in my hands here. The switching can take a little bit longer than it should, so that could get a little bit more refined, but it could definitely come in handy. This device also gives us excellent recording quality. In this case, you are seeing first the recording with the ultra-wide camera that may not have so much definition, but it is something normal in this type of cameras of mobile devices. But notice how switching to the main camera greatly improves the definition and keeps the color representation very well. Also, the exposure keeps it at a constant level. It does not seem to have abrupt changes in this regard, and even recording with the zoom camera again maintains the same consistency in color, which is very positive, talking about the whole system of video recording with multiple lenses. And the funny thing here is that it also allows you to use the different types of X-Mesh color rendition that we saw in photography, but also applied in video. So you can choose your favorite color rendition, whether you want more contrast or less contrast depending on the shadow rendition. So the reality of things is that it's a versatile camera in this sense as well, so the user can choose what they like best. In indoor scenes we will also have a good quality, although you will surely notice that the change between one camera and another may seem a bit abrupt at times. I'll tell you more specific details about the zoom later, but I think the result is still good in terms of light and color management. Although in indoor scenes maybe the white balance can get a little more confused and the zoom camera can get to generate a little more noise when you start using it, although later you notice how it tries to optimize the image to reduce as much noise as possible. Then it seems to me that the video camera also performs well. You even notice that in backlit scenarios it also has an excellent behavior with the ultra-wide camera, keeping perfectly well the exposure of the most illuminated areas, even when it comes to detect the face. And it also maintains the shadow area with good lighting. With the main camera also has this same behavior, although the most illuminated area is perhaps slightly overexposed, but still maintains a good balance of light and shadow. Even with the zoom camera, it gets to have a good job, unlike what we were seeing in the photograph. That's why I think in photography it could receive an upgrade for improvement, as even in video recording it manages to maintain a good balance of highlights and shadows for a very high dynamic range. The device also has an HDR recording mode, which if you see it on compatible devices can give you more realism by the intensity of illumination that can project the screen in the most illuminated areas. Although the overall result does not seem so attractive to me in matters of light and shadow balance, as the shadow area is a little darker than I would like. But I insist, this is a special mode for compatible devices. And at night it is confirmed that it is a good camera, although unlike photography it costs a noise. You get to perceive a muddy effect in some situations a little darker, which is normal in such dark conditions. In fact, it is remarkable that it does not have so much noise, although the muddy effect it produces can be a bit unpleasant for some people. But that is removed with the main camera, which gains much better light input, has well-defined objects. The highlights area also gets to underexpose in a good way to have a good balance of highlights and shadows. And with the zoom camera, we also have a good behavior, so I think it is a device that is up to what one would expect from something high-end, even in video recording in this type of more complicated scenarios. Even in the darkest areas, we see that it has a good light input thanks to the camera. It does not have an exaggerated quality, but it does become remarkable. And note that the device has very good stabilization. The ultra-wide camera will disguise movements better, even when running. And with the main camera, it still maintains good stability when you're walking. And when you're running, while it's not as spectacular as the ultra-wide, I think it's still a very positive thing. Even with the zoom camera, you're going to notice that it has good stability, although obviously when you're running it's going to be a much more complicated task. But from my point of view, it does have a very high level of stabilization. Super stable mode is also available, although the colors are distorted in a really bad way. You will use the ultra-wide camera and also the video will be in full HD, so I would not highly recommend recording with the super stable mode. This device also offers us a portrait recording mode, which is going to be in full HD at 24 frames per second, trying to simulate cinema recordings. But in this case, honestly, it is not a positive mode. If you don't move too much, maybe the result can be acceptable, but it doesn't really perform very well. Notice how the intensity of the blur doesn't change depending on my distance. Although in this case it does keep the objects in focus, but in the area of the hands and the movement it is still not precise enough to be a very remarkable video. Although it is getting closer and closer to the result achieved, for example, by the iPhone or the latest Galaxy. This device also integrates a fast camera mode, but it goes at a low bit rate, so when you pause the content you will notice little level of detail. Although it starts from 15x, which from my point of view is too fast to record people's movements, so I don't like the result so much. Although if you go to the fastest, it can go up to 1800x, so you can definitely record much more impressive things like the growth of a plant or something similar, obviously going through the in-between. So the fast camera I think is good, although it could get even better. In fact, it is curious that it also allows you to record time-lapse with the telephoto camera, something that few devices allow. In slow motion, we will find 3 speeds. The most basic is 120 frames per second. You are watching a video recorded with 240 frames per second, maintaining full HD resolution, something that is considerably good, and the slowest can go up to 960 frames per second, and it has a selector to automatically start recording video at a certain position. So the result is really very good in terms of the super slow motion. And finally, in other parameters, note that the focus is also very accurate. Whether you are far away or close to the camera, it keeps a very good and very stable focus. Even also if you present objects in front of the camera, the focus is going to adjust relatively easily. The ultra-wide camera, remember that it also has autofocus, and it's also going to react and respond in a good way with good speed and good stability. Even the zoom camera notes how well and quickly it gets to adjust its focus. So it's a camera that has excellent video recording performance. In fact, I really liked it for macro video. And regarding the zoom, you had already seen some examples, but in this case, let me show you what the maximum range is, which in video recording will go up to 15x if you record in 4K, or 20x if you record in full HD, or 10x if you record at 60 frames per second. So the behavior is a bit strange in terms of maximum range, but it is very noticeable that the intermediate zoom between 1 and 4x is very low quality. After that, the level of detail is a bit better, but the video zoom definitely does not have as much range, so this point does not seem to me the most positive of this equipment. The front camera has a good quality in outdoor video recording, although curiously it does not seem to have as much stabilization as if we saw in the rear camera. The good news is that it has an excellent level of amplitude, so sacrifice stabilization for wide. In fact, if you use the 1x setting, you do gain good stabilization. But notice that in terms of dynamic range, it doesn't have anything very remarkable. It won't be a good idea to shoot backlit because you still get a lot of background burn, but what I definitely love is how wide the lens is. Although indoors you will notice that as a result of being such a wide lens, it can generate a lot more noise in the darker areas. Fortunately though, it maintains good color saturation. But it is a camera that does need a lot of light to give us a good video result. We will confirm this at night, where you will notice that there is a lot of noise, especially if you use the wider setting on the edges. The color rendition can also become quite confusing when recording at night. Although fortunately in this case, if you're in the darker areas, you'll notice that you can use the screen to light up better, and it's a must if you want to record with acceptable quality in extremely dark scenes. So that's the price to pay for having such a large camera. It has little light input, and that does become noticeable at night. This front camera also offers us the fast camera mode with the same behavior that we saw in the rear camera. In the front camera, curiously, we also have slow motion at 120 or 240 frames per second, something I had not seen so far. So it's one of the most advanced front-facing slow cameras out there. It doesn't have a front portrait recording mode, but it does integrate a dual recording mode that allows us to record with both the front camera and the rear camera, or even use 2 rear cameras. The only detail here is that it is curious how the front camera crops it too much, so it's very close despite being such a wide camera. Fortunately, it lets you switch between the 3 rear cameras, so you have the full zoom range. That's a very positive thing, and it also maintains autofocus with any of the 3 cameras. So you have very good versatility in this mode. In fact, you could also use a picture-in-picture mode with a floating rectangle, and you can move it around the screen but with a little stop on the right. You can't resize this rectangle and you can't rotate it so that the front camera has the most space. For that, you have to stop the recording and start it again. But it keeps the same zoom and focus behavior. And as I tell you, if you rotate to put the front camera in the larger position, you'll notice that it's a very close camera. No matter how much you stretch your arm out, it's going to be very difficult to frame you correctly, and that's very strange considering what a wide camera it is. Now let's focus on the software of this device that comes with MUI 14.2. That is the latest version of this system from Huawei, and for the latest features and support for Google services by installing them from the app gallery with Micro G. I already explained in another video how to do it, but it is quite simple. So nowadays you can already use the vast majority of Google applications without any problem. Although anyway, I would still recommend this device only to the most enthusiastic, that in case it stops working, that method can look for some other method or similar things. But if you are one of those who don't want to mess around with apps as much, then you still have certain limitations because App Gallery doesn't have as many apps available as we would like. Also remember that Huawei doesn't offer a clear update policy, which is quite strange, although it is expected that from the looks of it, this device could receive several years of updates, but we would like more if Huawei would be clear about how many years it is going to offer. Let me tell you about some added features in this device. Let's start with themes, and note that we have interactive themes also available on this device, with which you could even customize your lock screen as well. Notice that some themes come with these kinds of animations that are going to be distributed along the screen as well, and even also notice that within each theme you could get to apply different customization styles. Then you can customize it by choosing specifically which emojis you want to use. Let's simply select some of these and that's it. Press apply, it immediately starts generating all these animations, and that's it. Notice that at the moment of locking the screen, this is transferred to the always on screen and also to the lock screen. So I find it very good animation and customization that Huawei can get with all these themes. This is a point that I loved. And while we're on the main screen, let me show you that it also has some widgets hidden in icons that have a bar at the bottom to show you that we're talking about an application icon that has more tools if you slide it up. Obviously, not all applications are supported, but it can become useful in system applications. And as you saw, it does have always on display. In this case, in conjunction with the theme, it can show you different animations, or you could also add your own images to the always on display, and you can select the style you want it to have. Although apparently the images in always on display will not be full screen, but only when you customize it through the themes. But note that in the themes, if you select some magazine option, you could really get to enjoy these more advanced features. So you can select your photo and see how it will automatically crop you, and this would be the result also in conjunction with customizing your photos and always on display. It will also have available the Huawei voice assistant called Celia, with which you could ask it for some information, but I think it is a little more useful to ask it to do some action in the system, because really to ask it for information, it is not too smart. But you could tell it turn on the flashlight, and these types of activities I know if it's going to do them in a good capacity. Turn off the flashlight. However, if you ask it for information, it will most likely just send you to an internet search, so it is an assistant that is still in development and could not be considered a strong point. The one-handed use mode fortunately is good because it resizes not only on the vertical axis but also on the horizontal axis to make it much more convenient to reach any area of the screen, and it also has smart tools to keep the screen on while you are viewing it, and especially also to do some gestures in the air. So watch how through simple gestures you could scroll your screen up or down. You simply have to follow the indicator, and you could also take screenshots simply by closing your fist. So it has good features. Obviously, it also supports the gestures that we're already used to from Huawei, like 2 knuckle taps to take screenshots or 2 knuckle taps to start screen recording, or you can even draw with the same knuckle some specific area of the screen that you want to capture. Also remember that it has a dock to open applications quickly, and these applications will open in a floating mode. In this case, unfortunately, it only supports one app at a time in this floating mode, so it definitely has little versatility with respect to multitasking. We would like it better if it allowed us to open many apps at the same time, but in this case, the experience is quite limited, so we don't have such advanced tools. Remember that we could also move the window to one of the corners if we want to open the floating window mode or if we want to open the split screen mode. In that sense, if they give us a much more advanced experience for a control through gestures, and in conjunction with the split screen and the floating screen, you could have 3 apps open at the same time. Remember that Huawei will also offer the Super Hub, which is another sidebar as a sort of shared wallpaper holder between multiple Huawei devices. They will also integrate the Smart Control app to use the infrared as a universal remote control. You simply select the type of device you want to control and then search for the brand to finish configuring it completely. It also has a tool to measure through augmented reality, although by not having a time-of-flight sensor, measurements can become inaccurate, so I would not trust so much of this tool, but it exists. And within the gallery, you can also enter the photo editing section to remove objects. You can have a manual or smart adjustment. Then just specifically enclose what you want to remove and notice how the detection is not that advanced and it's a fill simply considering the pattern of what's around, but it's not a fill through artificial intelligence. So definitely that the experience is not going to be very good with this smart eraser because you get to notice a hell of a lot of what's behind it. That is, it does not use generative artificial intelligence as several devices are starting to do. It also integrates another option to easily create a collage which comes in handy. And another option that I also like a lot is this option to compare with what you could quickly control 2 photos so you can select which one you like and you can quickly delete one or indicate that you like another. Huawei's system seems to me to be a bit behind in terms of features. Currently, it doesn't seem to me to be the most advanced, so hopefully Huawei will continue to update it to add new tools. At least this device does integrate the X-axis optical drive, so the interaction in the system does feel advanced in several scenarios, but I think there are more options where you could take advantage of this vibration engine to generate a much more advanced and premium interaction. The fingerprint reader is inside the screen and its operation being an optical reader is not as fast as ultrasonic readers, but it works well, allows you up to 5 different records, and since it is a reader that is inside the screen, also allows you to customize your animation, although not with as much variety, but if you have enough options. Also, for a little more convenience, they offer you facial unlocking, but in this case it is only in 2 dimensions, unlike other premium Huawei devices that integrated a facial recognition in 3D, so it is not as secure. It just might give you a little more convenience, but for convenience you could use smart unlocking that in conjunction with accessories like watches, Huawei bracelets or headphones could make the device stay unlocked while they are connected, so you would not have to be placing every time your fingerprint, although it does not have Google Smart Lock for obvious reasons, so you could not put a specific location in which you want your phone to stay unlocked. It also has a Huawei password manager where you can store all your data to fill them automatically with your fingerprint, but it is not a manager that is synchronized between all your Huawei devices, unlike the Google Manager or Samsung Pass or iCloud Keychain, so it is a simple password manager that should improve soon. Fortunately, we will find good tools like locking applications to select your fingerprint again to access some of them, also the safe to protect your files, and also the option to search for your device in case you lose it, but as privacy issues does not integrate a VPN nor has a child mode that allows you to authorize only certain applications while you're in that mode, has a permissions manager where you can quickly see what permissions are using applications, and thus you can realize if there is one that is being too invasive with you. You can also automatically remove the metadata from your photos to share them so they don't carry the location and time, and it has a super privacy mode which is quite curious because it will disable the camera, the microphone and the location of all the apps immediately. And lastly, you also have the private space where you would have another cell phone available, so it's like having 2 cell phones in one each with its own applications and files. It will also give you some smart suggestions. For example, in this case it tells me that WhatsApp has been accessing the contacts too many times in the last 24 hours. then you might also realize which applications are too intrusive within the optimizer application. We are going to find that it also has a virus scanner with technology from over 360, which is a cybersecurity company that is not as renowned as others, but obviously Huawei still has many limitations to collaborate with other companies, this due to the US blockades. And remember that it also integrates the digital balance where you can see how much time you are consuming, or also manage your children's device directly from this, although all the devices must be Huawei and you can set limits a few hours to go to sleep and similar things, so it can get to help you. And also remember that Huawei integrates good emergency options where you can fill in your contact information, send messages or calls automatically when you make the emergency call, and for that you must press 5 times the power button. The battery is 5200 milliamps, and in this case you know that Huawei usually optimizes its system quite well to consume little energy. Although if you install the Google Micro G services and all that will surely consume a little more energy. And in my case I installed those services and the battery yielded as expected in my drain test with the foreground. Remember that ran this draining application and definitely reach 4 hours with 10 minutes is something positive but not spectacular. And in the case of playing YouTube videos in the foreground and having the drainer in the background, we also noticed that it reached a considerably high figure, 8 hours and 50 minutes, but the drainer was constantly closing, so it seems that currently Huawei has a little more aggressive management of applications running in the background as opposed to years past where it managed them in a better way. Then if some applications are closed or you are not receiving notifications from some applications or watches or accessories, you need to enter this section for you to indicate which applications you want. If you continue to run in the background, then the power management seems to me that has worsened over past generations. Has the normal saving mode but does not have a much more extreme saving mode for emergencies, and that is another section where it could and should improve. And the charger is 100 watts, fortunately comes included in the box, so we did the test by activating the turbocharge that if you did not know is activated while the charge percentage appears. Then with that turbocharge with 15 minutes recovered 48% power, with 30 minutes it got up to 78%, and the full charge finished it in 44 minutes. So considering it's a slightly larger than average battery, I think the charge is fine, although it's not its most attractive point. Although if you compare it to the Samsung charge or the Apple charge, it's definitely completely superior. It also supports wireless charging of 80 watts, which would also be very fast. Although obviously the charger is sold separately, and it also supports reversible wireless charging of 20 watts, which means that if you place the iPhone on the back of this phone, it can charge very fast thanks to this technology. So it definitely offers us good specifications in this aspect. And also note that in the battery status section, it will indicate the current health of your battery. And also if you want to use the smart charging, that would help you to charge slower if you usually leave it connected every night. Although it is not a recommended practice, but with the smart charging it would help you to preserve the health of the battery. Or you could also enable a charging limit if you are one of the users that need to have your device connected to the current all the time because you drive a cab or something similar. You could enable this limit in 70% to take care of the battery and that it does not deteriorate so fast. Connectivity will be another weak point because it does not support 5G networks. This is curious because in China, if it supports 5G networks, but globally does not support that connectivity. And definitely that could be a weak point if you want the most modern. Although today, at least in Mexico, does not get to take advantage of 100% of the 5G technology. 5G technology, but for being a high-end device, is clearly a weak point. Is also curious that does not allow us to add one eSIM, and that obviously if you could consider something much more serious, because when you go traveling is much more practical to use one eSIM instead of a card without physical, but here is not available option. Supports Wi-Fi network 6. So yes, you can get to offer good download speeds of our data applications and information. Although it has Bluetooth 5.2, which is not the latest, and that could also come to resent a little. However, remember that also integrates near-link technology Huawei that is still not used 100%, but is something more advanced than Bluetooth Huawei is already implementing in some of its accessories. And of course, it also has NFC, which in this case will be useful to connect to accessories or similar things, but not to make mobile payments since Google Wallet does not work to make payments on this device, and Huawei Wallet still does not have any expansion plan to support payments globally, so the only alternative would be that your banking application does support NFC payments, but this is really another limitation that this device still has. It is also capable of making a wireless screen projection of very good quality, as it can be in mirror or desktop format, so you can open applications in a windowed mode and be much more productive, especially if you connect a wireless keyboard and mouse. In fact, it is also capable of projecting via cable with its USB port with the same feature that can be mirror or desktop mode, and in mirror mode is also able to hide notifications to maintain your privacy. In this case, does not have Android Auto, but if you can get to install but the process can become a little later or more complex, remember that in the description of this video I have the link where you can see the other video I did regarding how to go installing Google applications. This connector is USB 3.1 Gen 1, then we also offers a good data transmission speed, and fortunately with the other sensors there is no limitation, as if we will find accelerometer, geomagnetic field sensor and orientation, also gyroscope, a fully physical proximity sensor that has a good performance, and the other sensors that always usually come included. The Huawei ecosystem is extremely complete. Remember that it has many accessories like Huawei FreeBots, Huawei Watch, Huawei Band, Huawei MateBook, Huawei MatePad, and many more things. And is an ecosystem that not only is characterized by having many devices, but also a very good interaction between them. For example, accessories recognize them immediately to link them very easily. You can take pictures from any Huawei watch also in this. If you have a Huawei MateBook, you can send photos very easily or control your cell phone completely from the computer, drag and drop files right on the cell phone using the computer keyboard, or browse the files on your cell phone wirelessly as if you were connecting it via USB, so it is very advanced, the whole ecosystem. You can also have a shared clipboard or control your cell phone from a MatePad, all this thanks to the technologies of Super Device and Huawei Share. And I showed you a moment ago also the multi-camera technology that allows you to access the cameras of other devices. Then it is clear that the ecosystem is a very strong point of Huawei, really is very high level, although where it is still failing is in the control of devices. In this case, you would have to install the application of Huawei and iLife, but it is curious that it does not come factory installed through this application. You can control more home devices, but currently few use the Huawei protocol, so it will only recognize Huawei devices. Hopefully soon can be announced new partnerships for other manufacturers of home products to integrate Huawei technologies. With respect to cloud storage, if you notice that Huawei is a fairly strong brand because it offers its own cloud with 5 GB free, but also offers several advanced plans. For example, you can enjoy a plan of 50 GB or 200 or up to 2 TB available if you prefer to pay a subscription to have cloud backup of all your items. So in this case, it shows completely the independence of Huawei, unlike other brands that depend 100% on Google, but still has several points to improve. Although if you could get to install Google Home to control home devices that work with this protocol, then I think you do not have so many limitations in this regard, because you can already install such tools Google, although personally I do not have many accessories connected to this application. Let's move on to the performance test, because this is a new processor called Kirin 9010. Is a new generation processor from Huawei, although it doesn't have the most advanced generation of its manufacturing process, so don't expect it to be an ultra advanced chip, but this is because of all the restrictions that Huawei has from the US, so they can only use technology that doesn't have anything that is not in the latest generation. They can only use technology that has nothing to do with the US, and that makes their processes very difficult, but still have achieved a considerably efficient processor. Will not be the most powerful of today, but let's see what figures it gives us. And as you see in this case, it took about 2 seconds on average to open each application, showing excellent performance. So as you realize, for the vast majority of people, this processor will pass as a very high power processor, even though it is not the most powerful of today. But to open applications behaved very well, and note that in conjunction with 16 GB of RAM, we will also note that applications are kept running constantly. Note that we have not seen any reboot. Really is one of the devices with more RAM market, then do not expect to give you an experience of few applications open at the same time. In this case, if you can keep open all the applications you want, and the device will not get to feel slow at any time. Notes that has a really high performance to be able to switch between all the applications you want, and end storage and COF 12 gigabytes is also very good. In this case, I have the version of a terabyte, but the version that is distributed in Mexico is 512 gigabytes, which is still very good space, although you cannot expand it through microSD cards, but either way it is very good. Although apparently in some distributors you could get to find the version of a terabyte. Then we will test how this device behaves exporting videos using the integrated video editor called Petal Clip, which, by the way, is a pretty good editor that I had forgotten to mention in the software part, because they bring many options. It's not going to add watermark, and it's a completely free editor. So let's see how long it takes to export these united clips that in total last 1 minute. All of them were recorded with this device in 4K and ready. As you see, it took about 37 seconds. And here you start to notice that it is not a processor as powerful as others that we could find today. But if you do not mind waiting a little longer, if it can serve to export videos in 4K also. Let's talk about the games, but first let me show you that in the battery settings, if we find a maximum performance mode with which you could still bring the power to the maximum, although in this case we do not enable those options to test because they are disabled by default. And within the applications and services section, you can also find a section called Apps Assistant, where you can verify that this option is enabled to have additional tools when playing games, or even when you are in some multimedia applications. Here you can access the games area, which is the game manager, where you can see all the content you have installed. In this case, I must be very clear with you, and although it is already possible to install several Google services, there are still some games that do not work. Then you must verify individually game by game if it works on this device or not. So personally, if you really like games, I still would not recommend you to buy this device, because you can have a very unstable experience. Although several games already allow you to retrieve your progress from your Google account, but there are some other content that still does not work. In this part, you have additional tools that I will show you in a moment. When we enter the games, note that once you are inside a game, you can desist from the top down to access the do not disturb mode, to lock the brightness, take screenshots or screen recordings, and also has a game accelerator that is enabled immediately. You can also access the part of all functions to add some buttons like disable the knuckle gestures or avoid interruptions on the right side. Will also give you direct access to applications, so that without having to leave your game, you can answer any message quickly, but still does not include other options that we have already seen in other Huawei, as control through gestures of this style. And in this case, I would also like to integrate more options for monitoring frames per second or something more advanced. Still seems that Huawei could greatly improve this experience. In the case of Call of Duty, notice that it does support very high quality graphics at a very high frame rate by default, but it can even go up to a maximum rate or even an ultra rate. Although when you select this rate, the graphics quality goes down. So let's say there are two ways to play this content, whether you want to give priority to the graphics quality or priority to the frames per second rate. The graphic quality or priority to the frames per second rate. It does not support all the effects at the same time. Only the anti-aliasing seems not to be compatible at the same time with other effects. And if several experimental functions are available also. Obviously, if you play with the ultra rate, the graphic quality goes down and several effects are also disabled. First, we played with the maximum rate, and in this case, the experience definitely going to be very good. It feels like a device that, if it is high-end, does not seem that the processor is of past generations. So in this specific game, you will not have any difficulty. The game runs well, and complies very well, plus it does not get to report too much heat. With the ultra rate also goes pretty well, although in this case allows 90 frames per second instead of 120 as allowed by perhaps other processors, also high-end, but really is not much difference when playing, will not be too noticeable. But obviously it should be noted, because if it would be a difference compared to last generation processors, but the truth is that the experience, if it is very good, allows you to play with much soltura and much fluidity. You will not feel any lock at any time, and the temperature is still well controlled. In the Legends game, we changed the automatic detail for something manual to get to the ultra settings at 60 frames per second to put a test. Extreme, in this case the device device I think manages its power quite well to avoid overheating, so regardless of a small low peak at the beginning that always happens in this game, then maintained a fairly stable experience at 90 frames per second, but then went down to 60 frames per second and then remained stable, so it seems to be adjusting to not get too hot too much. And in fact we had set the game at 60 frames per second, but you know, this game can go up to over 60 at times. However, in this case I think the experience is quite stable, avoiding fluctuations and simply adjusting its rate depending on the heating, which in this case reached 42.9 degrees Celsius, so it is not something outrageously high either. In PUBG by default is in HD with a high rate of frames per second, but note that if it allows us to go up to Ultra HDR to an ultra rate, or even in HDR also allows us to go up to an extreme rate, although in this case we will give priority to the graphic quality to test it and also enable the smoothing in 4X to see how it goes. And again, the experience was good, simply occurred a few peaks a little low at the time of going down, which could become normal in several devices, but again, the experience was very good. 60 frames per second, 100% stable, except for a few small moments in 55 frames per second, but really is not something noticeable to the eye, then confirms that the experience is really very good playing with this device at the level of hardware and power, but as I say, at the software level, you could still find some games with limitations that do not allow you to log in or need something additional. That does not have installed this device, for that reason still could not recommend it if your priority is gaming, but if you like to play some of the content I've been testing, I guarantee that the experience is good and have no problems, but there are other games that do have some little details. And finally, in Henshin Impact, we changed the default medium setting to select the very high setting with 60 frames per second, and also the motion blur, we set it to very high quality. And again, it is surprising that this device has had such a high performance that can reach the height of the high-end devices of this year, then report very few low peaks, and although if you get to have a high temperature did not exceed 45 degrees Celsius that other devices if they have exceeded, and it should also be noted that we played on a hot day, then the truth is that although in benchmarks does not look so powerful, processor in practical life, if it is a processor that gives us a fairly high performance. As a conclusion, this is a device that we could determine as an expert in photography with a tremendously good design that is not only beautiful but resistant, also has good screen and good sound. The front camera possibly remains owing, especially when there is not so much light, and software level still needs to improve, especially if you want to attract more users, but the performance is also very good. Then it is a device that can really satisfy many users, although still users who need services like Google Wallet to make mobile payments or some other specific tools could still get to have an experience that does not satisfy them completely. So check well what kind of user you are, but it is definitely a very good device that we hope will continue to improve with future updates. For now, we have reached the end of this video. If you liked, you know you can indicate it, and we'll see you next time.